Find a comfortable position. Let your body relax. Take one slow breath in and let it go. There is nowhere you need to be right now. Nothing to do. Just rest and let the story carry you gently away. There is a pyramid in front of you. It has exactly 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. The people who built it knew this. They counted carefully across multiple generations of architects to make sure the number was right. And at the spring equinox, every year at the same hour, as the sun hits the north staircase at the precise angle they calculated, a shadow falls in the shape of a serpent descending from the top of the pyramid toward the earth. The feathered serpent god, Kukulkan, returning to the world. They built this on purpose, without computers, without telescopes, using shadow and obsession and an extraordinary patience for getting things exactly right. You are standing at the base of El Castillo, the great pyramid of Chichen Itza, in the hour before dawn, in the year 850 CE. The air is warm and thick and smells of copal incense drifting from a temple somewhere above you. The sky is enormous, full of stars, and the Milky Way arches overhead in a way that makes it look, if you grew up here, like a great celestial road, the path the dead walk after they leave this world. You have no idea where you are. Not really. Here is something most people get wrong about the Maya. You have probably heard that they vanished, disappeared, that one day they were here and then they were not. 7 million Maya people alive right now in Mexico and Guatemala and Belize and Honduras would like a quiet word with whoever started that story. What the Maya did was not vanish. Their great cities were abandoned, yes. The reasons for that are genuinely mysterious, and we will walk toward that mystery tonight, slowly, without rushing, the way you walk towards something you want to understand properly. There is a cenote, a sacred well, about a quarter-mile from where you are standing. Something is at the bottom of it. We will come to that. Find a comfortable position. Let the pyramid stand in the darkness behind your eyes. Let's begin. Dawn in the tropics is not gradual. One moment the sky is deep blue-black with a thin seam of lighter color at the horizon. Then the color spreads, faster than it should, amber and orange, and then the white heat of actual tropical sun, and everything that was shadow becomes stone. You hear the city before you fully see it. A low rhythmic sound, stone grinding against stone. Women processing corn, maize, which is the first task of every morning in nearly every household in the Maya world. The medet sits in every home the way a stove sits in yours. The corn has been soaking overnight in water mixed with lime, a chemical process that unlocks nutrients in the grain, making it actually nourishing rather than merely filling. This process is called nixtamalization. The Maya invented it. You still use it today in every corn tortilla ever made, in every tamale, in every corn chip. The same chemistry, unchanged, running quietly through 1,000 years of history into your kitchen. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Dogs, small, compact, short-haired, with an air of calm authority, move between the buildings. Children appear in doorways. Somewhere near the market, a man is already arguing about a price. The buildings closest to the central plaza are white limestone, cut and fitted without mortar, catching the early light. Further out, the city softens into lower structures, thatched roofs, raised garden beds growing beans and squash alongside the corn. The three sisters, maize, beans, and squash, planted together because they help each other grow. The beans fix nitrogen into the soil. The squash shades the roots. The corn provides the stalk for the beans to climb. The Maya did not stumble into these combinations. They observed and tested and recorded and passed the knowledge on. The city has been here for 400 years. It does not look like a city in decline. Not yet. You need to work out what you are. This is more urgent than it sounds. Maya society is organized in a way that determines almost everything about your day: what you eat, where you walk, who you speak to and how, what you wear, whether you can enter certain buildings, and whether certain buildings even exist for people like you. At the top, the Aja, the Lord, the King, the divine ruler. He is not simply a man who has power. He is, in Maya cosmology, a conduit between the human world and the world of the gods. His blood is sacred. His actions during ceremonies do not merely symbolize divine favor, they produce it. His role is as much priest as ruler, and the two are here the same thing. Below the Aja, the nobility, the priests, the scribes, the warriors, the administrators. Their children are educated, their households are permanent stone, they eat meat, they wear jade. Below them, the merchants, the skilled craftspeople, the farmers who own their land. Respectable, useful, most of what makes the city function. And below them, the laborers, the servants, and the slaves, people captured in war or sold into bondage by debt. You are, after a brief assessment of your clothing and your expression, somewhere in the middle. This is actually the best place to be. Too low, and your life is entirely determined by others. Too high, and there are ceremonial obligations that are painful in a very literal sense. The middle is workable. The middle involves food and relative safety, and the freedom to walk through the market and decide which direction to look. The morning crowd in the plaza does not pay particular attention to you. This is reassuring. A woman carrying a clay pot on her head passes you with the effortless balance of someone who has never once thought about what she is doing. She does not spill a drop. The market of Chichen Itza, at its peak morning hour, is one of the most extraordinary places in the world. You walk into it and the noise hits you first, not chaotic, but layered. The sound of cloth being spread on stone, pottery being tested with a careful tap, numbers being negotiated in a language you don't understand, in a rhythm that sounds underneath the unfamiliar syllables, exactly like every market negotiation everywhere. The goods are extraordinary. Obsidian blades from the volcanic highlands of Guatemala, black, translucent, sharper than surgical steel. Jade from the Motagua Valley, which the Maya value above gold, because jade is green, and green is the color of water and corn and life. Cloth-dyed brilliant colors, blue from indigo, red from cochineal insects crushed against the fabric, rubber balls, dried fish, dried chili, honey from stingless bees. Copper bells traded up from people to the south, and cacao. The cacao pods sit in small piles counted carefully. They are money, not symbolic money, actual money, in the sense that you can bring a certain number of cacao beans to a market stall and walk away with a turkey. The Maya were among the first people on Earth to understand that an arbitrary but widely agreed upon object could represent value. They just chose something that also tastes good, which is arguably more honest than gold. The drink made from cacao is nothing like chocolate. It is bitter, frothy, mixed with chili and water, and sometimes ground corn, served cold. It tastes like a question you weren't expecting to be asked. You buy a small amount of dried fish, and a handful of cacao beans and feel briefly like you are getting the hang of this. You are not getting the hang of this, but the feeling is pleasant. You eat, not in the market that is for buying, but in a courtyard nearby, where a woman has set up a small cooking area and is making food for whoever passes with the right number of cacao beans. She is making tortillas. She presses a ball of masa, the nixtamalized corn dough, between her palms with a practiced rotating motion, then places it on a clay comal over a low fire. It puffs. It chars slightly at the edges. She flips it. You eat it with black beans, and a sauce made from tomatoes and chili, and something you cannot identify that is probably epazote, a herb that smells like strong tea and slightly like a forest after rain. Here's what you should understand while you eat. The Maya did not think of corn the way you think of corn. Corn was not a crop. It was the material from which humans were made. The Popol Vuh, the great Maya creation myth, is explicit on this point. The gods made humans from maize dough after 2 earlier failed attempts using mud and wood. You are, in Maya cosmology, a corn person. The food you are eating is, in a sense, your own origin story. This gives the act of grinding corn, of tending the milpa, of eating the tortilla, a weight that nothing in modern food culture quite matches. The woman who made your tortilla does this every morning, twice a day, for her entire life. She does not think of it as spiritual practice. She thinks of it as breakfast. But the two things are not here separate. You eat slowly. The food is better than you expected. The morning has grown warm. In a building near the main temple complex, a man is carving stone. You can hear it before you see it. A small, precise tapping sound, almost musical, repeated at intervals of a few seconds. You follow the sound and find a workshop, a low-ceilinged room with good light from a wide doorway, stone dust on the floor, and a man in his 40s carefully working a chisel against a limestone tablet. He is writing. Maya writing is not an alphabet. It is a complex system of around 800 glyphs, some representing whole words, some representing syllables, some serving both functions depending on context. It was completely undeciphered for over a century after European contact. Scholars argued for decades about its basic nature. It was not cracked until the 1950s and not fully readable until the 1970s, by which point nearly everything written in it had been destroyed. That last part is important. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, a Franciscan friar named Diego de Landa, a man who had studied Maya culture more carefully than almost any other European, and then concluded it was entirely the devil's work, burned every Maya book he could find. In July 1562, in the town of Mani, he burned 27 rolled manuscripts and 5,000 paper figures in a single afternoon. He wrote afterward that the Maya wept as though their hearts were being torn from their bodies. Of all the books the classic Maya ever wrote, everything they knew about medicine, astronomy, history, religion, agriculture, mathematics, 4 survive. 4. The man with the chisel in front of you does not know this yet. He is carving a date. He is recording that a king performed a certain ceremony on a certain day. He is doing this so that it will last. He believes it will last. Watch him work for a moment. The sound of the chisel is careful and steady. There is a building at the edge of the central precinct that is slightly different from the others. It is round, or at least its upper story is round, which is unusual in Maya architecture, which tends toward the square and the monumental. It sits on a raised rectangular base with small window-like openings set at precise intervals. At certain times of year, at certain hours, The sun enters one of these openings and falls exactly on a specific point inside. This is the observatory. The people who work here are not astronomers in the modern sense. They are priest mathematicians, men who track the movements of celestial bodies not for abstract knowledge but for practical divine guidance. The movements of Venus, in particular, are sacred. Venus rising as a morning star means one thing. Venus rising as an evening star means another. The intervals between these appearances, calculated over decades of observation, are used to time wars. You read that correctly. Wars were scheduled around Venus. The Maya long count calendar tracks time in cycles. 20 days make a uinal, 18 uinals make a ton, and so on, extending upward in units that eventually measure millions of years. The current Great Cycle, which started by their reckoning in August 3114 BCE, ends in December of 2012. In about 1200 years, a large number of people from a civilization that doesn't exist yet will convince themselves that this ending date predicts the apocalypse. They will sell books about it. They will make films. They will gather in groups to await the end. The Maya, for their part, considered this date approximately equivalent to a calendar page turning. The beginning of a new cycle, not the end of everything. They would have found the whole affair deeply confusing. The astronomer at his window is watching Venus. His lips are moving slightly, working through a calculation. You hear the crowd before you reach the ball court. The great ball court of Chichen Itza is the largest in Mesoamerica, 168 meters long, with stone walls 8 meters high, and at the center of each long wall, mounted high up where you would need to be an exceptionally good throw to reach it, a stone ring, not horizontal like a basketball hoop, vertical, facing sideways, the opening barely larger than the rubber ball. The game being played here is not a sport, or rather, it is a sport the way that a ritual is a ritual, technically a performance, but the stakes are real. The ball is solid rubber. It weighs several kilograms. Players cannot use their hands or feet, only their hips, elbows, knees. Getting the ball through that vertical ring is enormously difficult. Games can last for hours. The Maya invented rubber. Or rather, they discovered what you can do with the sap of the Castillo elastica tree, how to mix it with juice from morning glory vines and produce a material that bounces, that holds its shape, that can be formed into a ball and used for a game. The Olmec people, ancestors of the Maya, were doing this as early as 1600 BCE. 3,000 years before Charles Goodyear invented vulcanization and convinced the Western world that rubber was a European idea. The crowd at the ball court is loud and invested. People have, in all likelihood, placed bets. Who wins and who loses, and what happens to them afterward. This is a question historians still argue about. Some carvings suggest the losers were sacrificed. Some suggest the winners were. Some suggest captive warriors from defeated enemies played the game as their final act. The ball bounces off the wall with a sound like a drum beat. The midday heat is significant. There is no shade in the central plaza, and the white limestone reflects the sun upward as much as the sky delivers it down, so that you feel surrounded by light from all directions. The stone is hot under your sandals. You are sweating in a way that is both honest and uncomfortable. You follow others who are moving toward a path that leads north from the main plaza, through secondary buildings and low scrub vegetation, toward the sound of nothing. A strange absence of sound. You have been in this city for hours, and there has always been noise, and now there is a pocket of quiet. And as you step through a break in the trees, you understand why. The cenote. It appears suddenly, as cenotes do, a hole in the earth, perfectly circular, maybe 60 meters across, the water 40 feet below the surface, dark green and still. Limestone walls drop sheer all around. Roots trail down from the trees at the rim. The water does not move. This is the sacred cenote, Iquil, or a place very much like it. The Maya call it the mouth of the underworld, the place where Chak, the rain god, lives. The place where prayers go directly, without mediation, into the divine. They throw offerings in: jade, gold, pottery, rubber balls, copal incense wrapped in cloth, and more than that, more than objects. Something is at the bottom of this cenote. We will come to what is down there, but not yet. Stand at the edge for a moment. The water is perfectly still. The air here is cooler by several degrees. A single bird calls from the far side, and its sound crosses the water and reaches you clearly. There is something deeply calming about a body of water that goes nowhere. On a quiet street, 2 blocks from the market, in a low building with bundles of dried plants hanging from every available surface, a Haman is working. The Ashman is the Maya healer, priest, herbalist, diviner, and counselor in one. He is an old man with hands that move in a practiced, unhurried way through the bundles, selecting, measuring, combining. He does not look up when you arrive. He finishes what he is doing first. Maya medicine is, by the standards of most ancient civilizations, impressively rational. The Maya Codex from Dresden, one of the 4 surviving books, contains medical texts that describe plants and their applications with a precision that suggests centuries of careful observation and testing. They used plants in ways that modern pharmacology has subsequently confirmed. Willow bark for pain and fever, copal for antiseptic, quinine-containing plants for malaria. They also believed that illness had spiritual causes that required spiritual treatment. These 2 things, the herbal and the ceremonial, were not separate in Maya medicine. You did not choose between the physical cure and the ritual one. You received both because the body and the spirit were not separate things to be treated differently. The old man is making something for a woman seated across from him, who is holding a small child who is breathing badly. He works without hurrying. He says something to her in a low voice. She nods. He hands her the preparation and says something else. She asks a question. He answers it carefully. You watch from the doorway, not wanting to interrupt. The room smells of dried plants and smoke, and something underneath both that you cannot name, but that makes you feel, inexplicably, that things might be fine. They might be fine. There is a ceremony happening at the main temple. You knew this was coming. The priests have been preparing since before dawn, and the copal smoke has been thickening all morning. But the reality of it, when you get close enough to see, is more striking than you expected. The Ajah, the king, stands at the top of the pyramid steps. He is dressed in an elaborate costume, jade mosaic mask, feathered headdress so large and complex it looks like architecture, a belt hung with carved jade. He is magnificent in the way that things built to be seen from very far away are magnificent. He is a person who has become, at this moment, a symbol. And then the ceremony begins. Maya kings communicated with their divine ancestors through blood, their own blood specifically. The Khatun, the 20-year period, the accession, the drought, any moment of significant divine need, required the king to pierce his own flesh and allow the blood to fall onto paper, which was then burned, sending the communication upward with the smoke. This was not symbolic. It was believed to be mechanically effective. The blood fed the gods. The gods, in return, maintained the world. You watch from the plaza below, too far away to see the details clearly, which is perhaps just as well. The smoke from the burning is sweet and thick and drifts across the crowd. The people watching are silent, not afraid, reverent. This is not a spectacle for them. This is maintenance. The king is doing the necessary work of keeping the universe functioning, the same way someone mends a fence or repairs a roof. From this distance, it looks like theater. From this distance, everything does. You walk to the edge of the city. This does not take long. The city does not announce its ending, it simply thins, and then you are in a different place. Stone buildings give way to pole and thatch structures, then to milpa fields, the cleared agricultural plots where corn and beans and squash grow together in the system the Maya have been refining for 3,000 years. Beyond the fields, the jungle begins. The Maya jungle is not a neutral backdrop. It is one of the most biodiverse environments on Earth. Jaguars, which the Maya associate with the underworld and with kingship and with the night, move through it, though you are unlikely to see one in the afternoon. Tapirs and deer, sources of meat and, for the tapir, of a hide used for ritual. Hundreds of bird species, including the resplendent quetzal, whose iridescent green tail feathers are worth here almost as much as jade. And snakes. A significant variety of snakes, including the fer-de lance, which is fast, aggressive when surprised, and venomous in a way that makes distance advisable. The air here is different, heavier, rich with moisture and decomposing vegetation, and something that smells like nothing you have ever smelled in a city. The sound is different too. The jungle is loud. Insects, birds, frogs in overlapping layers. The city was noise on top of silence. This is noise all the way down. You do not go far. You stop at the edge of the cleared land and look into the trees, which close together about 30 yards in, making a wall of green. Somewhere in there are cities the Maya built and then left, already being reclaimed, that will not be found for another 1,000 years. The jungle is patient. The light is changing. The afternoon heat has peaked and is beginning, very slowly, to ease. Long shadows reach across the stone plazas. The market is thinning. People are moving toward their households, toward the evening meal. You walk to the observatory. At this hour, the astronomer priests are preparing for the evening's work. Venus will be visible tonight, not as a planet, but as a star brighter than any other in the sky, appearing near the horizon just after sunset. Its position, its brightness, the interval since its last appearance, all of this is data, recorded in tables in the codices, cross-referenced against tables going back for generations. The Maya Venus calendar is 584 days long. It tracks the complete synodic cycle of Venus, the time it takes for Venus to return to the same position relative to Earth and the Sun. The Maya calculated this to within 2 hours accuracy over a 500-year period. This was not idle curiosity. Venus rising as a morning star was associated with kukulkan, the feathered serpent, and with war. Battles were timed to Venus. The Aja would consult the Venus calendar before ordering his warriors to march. This is, from a modern perspective, an extraordinary idea, that the timing of a military campaign should depend on the position of a planet. From a Maya perspective, it was simply recognizing that the universe is interconnected in ways that careful observation can reveal. They were not wrong that the universe is interconnected. They were perhaps wrong about the specific connection. The astronomer writes something in a small book, bark paper covered in precise tiny glyphs. He dates the entry in the long count. He will check this record against observations from the next cycle and the one after that. The evening star appears at the horizon, brighter than it has any right to be. You are invited, in the way that hospitality works in places where turning away a traveler is considered more dangerous than the risk of the traveler, to eat with a family. The household is medium-sized, a main building of stone with 2 attached rooms, a separate kitchen structure with a permanent hearth, a small shrine in the corner of the courtyard where offerings of corn and copal are placed in the morning. 3 generations live here. Grandparents, parents, 4 children, ranging from a toddler to a girl of about 12, who watches you with open, assessing curiosity. The evening meal is the larger of the day's 2 meals. Black beans in a clay pot, corn tortillas cooked fresh, a stew made with turkey, a domesticated bird the Maya keep for eggs and meat, and chili and dried herbs. There is a small jar of honey from the native stingless bees, which produce honey different in flavor from European honeybees, thinner, slightly acidic, with a mineral edge. You eat sitting cross-legged on a mat, as everyone does. Chairs are not a Maya technology. This is fine. The mat is comfortable, and the food is excellent. The grandparents speak at length about something that makes the children laugh. The mother keeps the food coming without sitting down herself until everyone else has eaten. The father asks you, through gestures and the few words that transfer across the language gap, where you are from and how far you have walked. The city outside has gone quiet in the way that only cities go quiet when everyone has come indoors at once. The fire crackles. The children are beginning to yawn. The night is very warm and very full of stars. Late in the evening, a group of merchants returns to the city. You can hear them coming, the shuffle of feet on the Sakpa, the raised white limestone road that connects the cities of the Maya world. They are moving slowly, carrying loads on their backs, using tumblings, straps across the forehead that transfer the weight of the pack to the head and spine. It is an efficient system, developed over centuries in a landscape with no large pack animals, no horses, no cattle, no wheel used for transport. Everything moved on human backs along these white roads across hundreds of miles. The merchants carry obsidian from the highlands of Guatemala, a 5-day walk at minimum, copper bells from cultures to the south, cacao paste from lowland plantations, cotton cloth from coastal villages, salt from the Great Salt Flats near the northern coast, and from Teotihuacan, the great city of central Mexico, 500 miles to the northwest. They carry ideas. Teotihuacan fell 200 years ago, its pyramids abandoned, its political power collapsed. But its cultural influence continued to spread through the trade routes long after its fall. You can see it in the iconography of the temples here, in certain vessel shapes, in artistic conventions that traveled the merchant roads and took root in cities that never sent an ambassador or a soldier. Civilization spread the way water moves, through the smallest available channels, finding paths that direct contact never would. The merchants set down their packs at the edge of the market. Someone brings them water. They sit for a long time without speaking, with the specific exhausted satisfaction of people who have walked very far and are now home. The city sleeps around them. You walk back through the empty ball court after dark. The game ended hours ago. The crowd is gone. The stone is still warm from the day's sun, and the air has cooled enough that you can feel the warmth rising from the floor through the soles of your feet. The court is enormous and silent. The walls rise on either side, pale in the moonlight, and at the center of each long wall, halfway up, the stone ring, the target, is a perfect circle of darker stone against lighter stone, facing sideways, still as it has always been. In the daylight, this court was loud and urgent and full of consequence. Now it is simply architecture, stone and shadow and the sound of your own footsteps, which are very small against the space. Something about the scale of this place in the dark reminds you of the pyramid, of the observatory, of the cenote. The Maya built things for the long view, things meant to be here not for a generation but for centuries, for the stars to move over, for the rain to wash, for the jungle to eventually reclaim. You sit on the stone at the edge of the court. The sky above is extraordinary. No competing light, stars from edge to edge. The same stars the astronomer is tracking from his window in the observatory, 100 meters away, writing their positions in a book that will be burned in 700 years by a man who had not yet been born. But that is 700 years from now. Tonight the stars are simply beautiful, and the court is quiet, and you are breathing slowly, and there is no urgency anywhere. There is a moment in history that is worth sitting with before we go further. It is July 12th, 1562. The place is a town called Mani in the Yucatan. A Franciscan friar named Diego de Landa, a man who spoke Maya, who had studied Maya culture in extraordinary detail, who had written a book about it, has gathered everything he could find. 27 bark paper codices, 5,000 ceramic figures, objects from temples, ritual items, everything that could be described as idolatrous. He burned all of it in a single afternoon. He wrote afterward, in his account of Yucatan, that the Maya wept and wailed as though their hearts were being torn from their bodies. He recorded this without apparent concern. Later, much later, Diego de Landa would express some regret about the burning. He came to believe he had perhaps been too thorough. What was in those 27 books, we do not know. Medicine, almost certainly. Astronomy, history, mythology, mathematical calculations extending across thousands of years. The knowledge of a civilization that had been accumulating carefully for 15 centuries, carried in portable form by scribes who had devoted their lives to maintaining it. Gone in an afternoon. The 4 books that survived, in Paris, in Dresden, in Madrid, and one recently identified fragment, have been studied by every scholar who has ever worked on the Maya, examined with every technology available, and they are extraordinary, full of astronomical tables, mythological scenes, ritual calendars, prayers. They are also 4 books. What we know about the Maya is, in the end, what survived a bonfire. The man with the chisel, carving stone, was right to carve stone. It is 1904. An American archaeologist named Edward Herbert Thompson has been lowering a dredge into the sacred cenote for 2 years. Thompson bought a plantation near Chichen Itza in 1894 and became obsessed, as certain people do, with a specific question. What was at the bottom of the cenote? The Spanish had recorded in the 16th century that the Maya threw offerings into the well. Gold, jade, people. Thompson wanted to know if this was true or simply a colonial explanation for a practice that had been misunderstood. What he pulled up from the bottom, through the dark water, through 40 feet of depth, through centuries of silt, was this: jade ornaments, copper bells, gold discs beaten into images of warriors and gods, rubber figures, wooden implements, copal incense, textiles, actual textiles, somehow preserved in the anaerobic mud at the bottom, and bones. Human bones, primarily from young men and children, consistent with sacrifice. The cenote you stood beside this afternoon, watching the still green water. The water was not empty. It was full, in the careful geological way that water fills things. of everything the Maya considered sacred enough to give without expectation of return. Thompson shipped most of what he found to the Peabody Museum at Harvard. Mexico has been asking for it back ever since. The cenote is in Yucatan. The objects are in Cambridge. The water is very still. The things at the bottom are not lost. They are simply in the dark, waiting with the particular patience of objects that have been waiting for a very long time. It is now approximately 820 CE. You have been in this city for what feels like a long time, long enough to understand its rhythms, the market days, the ceremony cycles, the agricultural calendar, the way the city moves through seasons like a body moving through its days. But something is different this year. The rains came late, and then they stopped. In the tropical lowlands, rain is not a comfort, it is a mechanism. The milpa fields need the rains. The cisterns the Maya dig to collect rainwater need the rains. The cenotes, fed by the underground water table, need the rains to recharge. The corn needs rain, and the corn is the food, and the food is here, not a category that admits failure. Paleoclimate data recovered from lake sediments and stalagmites in Belize shows that a series of severe droughts struck the southern Maya lowlands beginning around 820 CE. Not one drought, but a series of them, returning every 20 or 30 years, each one longer than the last. The timing corresponds almost exactly with the period when the great classic Maya cities began to be abandoned. This is not a clean explanation. Civilizations don't collapse from a single cause. There was also overpopulation and political fragmentation and warfare between cities that had been woven together by trade, now competing for dwindling resources. There was deforestation. The Maya had been cutting trees for centuries to fuel the lime plaster they used on their buildings, and the soil was thinning. But the rain stopping was the thread that, when pulled, unraveled the rest. The corn in the milpa is not growing properly this year. Everyone can see it. Nobody is saying it yet. The priests are calling the rain. The ceremony for Chak, the rain god, the one with the long curling nose, the one whose lightning axe splits the clouds, has been going on for 3 days. The copal smoke is thicker than usual. The offerings are more than usual. The priests have been fasting, which gives their movements a slightly unsteady quality, a deliberate weightlessness. They're doing everything correctly. The Maya approach to crisis was not despair. It was increased ritual precision, the belief that if the gods were not providing rain, then something in the communication had gone wrong, and the communication needed to be repaired. More offerings, more blood, more ceremony, a longer fast, a more elaborate calendar calculation to determine which days were propitious for which appeals. It is a deeply human response. When something is not working, try harder at the thing you believe in. You watch from the base of the temple steps. The drums have been going since before dawn. The chanting has a quality of accumulated exhaustion, not defeat, but determination. These are people who believe that the universe is responsive, that the correct ritual action produces the correct divine response, and who are therefore performing the correct ritual action with everything they have. The sky stays clear. It will stay clear for most of the next 2 years. There is nothing wrong with the ceremony. The ceremonies have worked before. They worked last year and the year before, and in the memory of everyone's grandparents. The sky is simply not listening the way it used to. The smoke rises and disperses. The drums continue. Civilizations do not end like stories end. There is no final scene, no announcement, no moment when everyone agrees that it is over. What happens instead is this: people leave, one family, then another. The skilled craftspeople who had stable commissions find that commissions are harder to come by. The merchants whose trade routes ran through this city begin routing through other cities. The farmers whose milpas produced excess for the market are now producing only enough for their families, and then less than that. The administrative system, the network of scribes and officials and tribute collectors that kept a city this size organized, requires surplus. Surplus requires agriculture. Agriculture requires rain. You walk through the city on a morning 2 years after the rains first stopped, and the difference is subtle but present. A stall in the market that was always open is now sometimes closed. A building near the western edge of the plaza that housed a workshop is empty, the tools gone, the floor clean, in a way that suggests someone packed carefully rather than fled in panic. A family compound that held 3 generations now holds 1. The king is still here. The ceremonies continue. The scribes are still carving dates. But the city is smaller than it was, and the people who remain know it, even if they are not saying it. The silence in certain streets has a quality that was not there before, not peaceful, but expectant. The silence of something waiting to see what comes next. Some people are staying because they have nowhere else to go. Some are staying because they believe it will get better. Some are staying because leaving feels like surrender, and surrender feels like giving up on everything their grandparents built. They are all reasons that make sense. They are all also insufficient. The last person leaves. Not the last person in the Maya world. There is no such event. But the last person in this city, in this specific cluster of plazas and pyramids and residential compounds that has been occupied for 500 years, eventually also leaves. They take what they can carry. They leave the stones. The jungle moves in immediately. Not dramatically, nothing that can be mistaken for a storm or a flood. It moves in the way that growing things move. A vine finds a crack between stones. Seeds blow into the corners of empty rooms. A tree that was kept trimmed away from the temple wall is no longer trimmed, and it grows, and its roots find their way under the limestone blocks. And over decades, the blocks shift. In 100 years, the plaza is unrecognizable from the outside. The buildings are still there. Stone does not disappear, but they are green, shaped like hills, indistinguishable from the natural landscape to anyone flying over. For 1,000 years, the forest holds them. In 1839, an American lawyer and explorer named John Lloyd Stevens arrived in Central America with an artist named Frederick Catherwood. They hacked through jungle for weeks, following rumors of stone cities. What they found, emerging from the trees, the carved stelae, the corbelled arches, the pyramids wrapped in roots, stopped them both. Catherwood spent weeks drawing what he found in enormous detail, because he knew that no one who had not seen it would believe the description. The stones were exactly where the last person left them. They had been waiting quietly for someone to come back. Before we arrive at the end of this night, there is something that needs to be said clearly. The Maya did not disappear. The cities were abandoned. The writing fell out of use, or rather, it was beaten and burned out of use by the institutions that replaced it. The political structures of the classic period were gone within 2 centuries, but the people were there. They had always been there. They survived the abandonment of the cities by moving to smaller towns, to villages, to the agricultural patterns they had maintained alongside the urban centers. They survived the Spanish conquest, which brought disease, measles, smallpox, influenza, that killed somewhere between 50 and 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas in the first century of contact. This was not an exaggeration. It was one of the largest demographic collapses in human history, caused not by warfare, but by the simple absence of immune resistance to diseases that had been circulating in the Eastern Hemisphere for millennia. They survived that. They survived forced labor, forced conversion, the systematic destruction of their books, the replacement of their calendar with another one, the suppression of their language. They are still here. 7 million people in Mexico and Guatemala and Belize and Honduras speak Maya languages today. The weaving traditions, the extraordinary textile patterns different from each village, carrying the iconography of the classic period in thread, are still being practiced. The ceremonies, adapted and transformed, continue. The pyramid will stand for another 1,000 years, minimum. The people who built it are still standing too. You are back at the base of El Castillo. It is late, later than late. The hour when the city has been fully quiet for a long time, when even the dogs have settled, when the copal smoke from the temples has thinned to nothing, and the sky is so full of stars that the darkness between them seems like an afterthought. The pyramid rises above you in the moonlight, the same as when you arrived, except that now you know what it is made of. Not just stone, though it is stone, limestone cut from the earth and fitted by hands that are gone now. It is also time, accumulated time, built into the shape of a building, dressed in astronomical precision, standing in a jungle that has been trying to reclaim it and has not succeeded. The night air has cooled. There is a breeze from the south that carries the smell of the jungle, wet and green and complicated, mixed with the drier smell of the plaza stones that have been baking in the sun all day and are now releasing their heat slowly into the dark. You sit at the base of the staircase. The steps above you number 365. Somewhere behind the trees, a night bird calls once and falls silent. The city around you breathes slowly. The remaining families in their stone houses have been asleep for hours. The astronomer in his round building may still be watching the sky. Men like that tend to watch until the sky goes pale. Everyone else has let the day go. You can let it go too. The stone at your back is still faintly warm. The stars are not moving, or they are moving so slowly that for the purposes of this night, they might as well be still. The night deepens, not darker. It is already as dark as it will be before dawn, but deeper in the way that very late night is deep. The quality of the silence has changed, become something softer, more complete. Even the jungle sounds have quieted. Even the insects have slowed. Breathe in. The air is warm and carries the last traces of the day. Corn, copal, stone, the distant sweetness of flowering trees whose names you don't know. It is the smell of a place that has been alive for a very long time. Breathe out. The Maya built their cities to last. They built their calendars to measure time in units so large they encompass cycles you cannot quite hold in your mind. They watched the stars with patience you can only approximate by sitting very still at the base of a pyramid in the dark, with nothing asking anything of you, and simply looking up. The long count is ticking forward, as it always has. Somewhere in the forest, the stones are exactly where they were left. The writing that survived, 4 books, and all those carvings in stone, is still being read by people who devoted years to learning how. The things that last are the things that were made carefully, with attention, by people who believed the work was worth doing, even if they would not see its completion. You don't need to carry that thought anywhere tonight. Let it rest here, at the base of the pyramid. Let the stars keep moving above you at their usual speed. Let your breath slow to match the pace of very old things that are not in a hurry. The night is quiet. The pyramid stands. You are very nearly asleep. The last star holds its position, and now your eyes are closing.